Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Proud Bavarian, and today we have a fun Victoria 3 dev diary that I want to discuss specifically with a glance towards history in this particular period. So that is the slant that we're taking as we analyze, of course, what is written here. This one is dev diary number 156 for Victoria 3, called Metternich Spoke to Me, which is a very funny title. I like that title. Now I do want to kind of persuade you, if you are one of the many people that used to be minorities in the Austrian Empire, today Metternich, but in the past he Mette doch. No longer do you need to be worried about him. Onwards and upwards from this, National Awakening is centered around the Austrian Empire and Balkan nations, with supporting content for the Ottoman Empire. Its central theme is the conflict between established dynastic states and aspiring nation-states. The vision of universal monarchy embodied by the Austrian and Ottoman empires is placed in contrast with the particular ambitions of the Balkan nations. The victory of the latter requires tearing the former to pieces, transforming subjects into citizens divided by blood and language. We already talked about this a whole bunch. There are so many interesting mechanics, and fundamentally I am actually very impressed by the rethinking that they did, where they said we have to take a step back. Citizenship isn't citizenship, because we are looking at subjecthood, where you're defined by the monarch, by the sovereign, or where you become the sovereign. So the body politic is constituted indeed by people that are supposed to represent, well, your country, your people, and so on. This is an interesting change because it very much differently classifies nation states from the original, of course, feudal/absolutist states. I really like what they did there. Now today we have something very important to talk about, and as I was reading this, I gotta tell you, I kind of felt, I felt talked to, okay? What I mean here is that as a German, we talk about Metternich, we talk about the System Metternich, the order, of course, that this brings and what exactly happened there a lot. And yet, or maybe because of this rather, we do of course have a little bit of a slant when it comes to talking about him. He virtually never plays any positive role. So I want to take some time to read this right here. Following the death of Emperor Franz I in 1835, the Austrian Empire was left in a difficult position. The new emperor, Ferdinand I and V, was considered by both his late father and his advisors to be incapable of effective governance. The will of the late Franz I hence constituted the Secret State Conference, a de jure advisory panel for the new emperor, which would serve as the de facto ruling cabinet of Austria until the revolutions of 1848. The panel's members would include the Habsburg Archdukes Ludwig and Franz Karl, Count Franz Anton von Kolowrad-Liebsteinsky, and Prince Klemens von Metternich. And here he is, and I will say, I always thought he looked goated when he was younger, and then he aged, somewhat ungracefully, but that doesn't really matter. He looks quite good here. I wish that this model actually, I don't know, there's something about the image of Metternich that this face, it's kind of like too nice grandpa, I suppose, that I associate with it. Now, I do want to note one thing, and that is the fact that he does not have a special kind of ideology. He is just an authoritarian. When one thinks of the Austrian Empire, Klemens von Metternich is likely to be one of the first figures that comes to mind. As foreign minister of the Austrian Empire, he orchestrated the marriage of Napoleon to an Austrian archduchess and chaired the Congress of Vienna. As state chancellor in the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, he developed a reputation as Europe's leading conservative statesman, dedicating much of his time to maintaining the post-Napoleonic geopolitical order. Following the death of Emperor Franz I, he is widely regarded to have been the leading power in Austria, leading a despotic government with zero tolerance for any liberal cause. I do want to frame this at least a little bit from the German perspective. Again, we do have something that the game lacks, and that is the German Confederation and the way that the will of the absolutist great powers, so we're speaking specifically, of course, of Austria and Prussia right here, the way that it was asserted onto smaller German states. You had to go through with certain laws, like, related, for example, to censorship and so on. And this period was actually crazy. Like, in the modern day, we can envision this. We know of regimes that are putting people into prison for whatever they are saying on an incredibly efficient basis, right? This is one of those things, the more modern we get, the more has this become a possibility. In the German mindset, the System Metternich, so we're talking about 1815 all the way to 1849, is the very first time that we are seeing this on a bureaucratic layer. I would personally argue, and this doesn't really go against anything that this, post here is saying, although obviously in the German storytelling, Klemens von Metternich is the central figure that we kind of focus when it comes to this, not that he is the lone man that wanted to enact this type of thing, but that he was the person leading the kind of assault on, well, speaking your mind, that kind of thing. But essentially, the entire mindset that a Kafka, for example, would have when it comes to the way that he perceives himself in society, but also, of course, in relation to the state and the state apparatus, the ability of the state apparatus to keep track of you, to put you into a terrible position whenever they see fit. This kind of thing, at least that is the reading that we have on a national level, was incredibly new in this time period. 1836, or rather Victoria III, actually does this as well, of course. The way that you can run a secret police, the way that bureaucracy works, only expands massively in that period, and it brings a lot of upsides in the way that you can run a state, but also without a doubt in the way that somebody like him, so the kind of politics that wants to put you into a situation where you are completely surveillable, right? This kind of thing is only possible in this period. That is at least how we frame it on a historical kind of view from Germany. Very, very interesting stuff. That is why he has such a special position in the storytelling, in the national storytelling, I guess, of Germany. Anyway, how true is this narrative? How does one portray a figure like Metternich, who has been alternately slandered and lionized, condemned and exonerated, appraised and reappraised, first by his contemporaries and then by historians? First, we must understand the real conditions within which he existed. We must understand that Austria was not conservative because of Metternich, and that Vienna, let alone all of Europe, did not bow to his whims. This obviously is true, right? What happened in the German Confederation, what I just talked about, whether you have the technology or not, would not have been facilitated. The people that kind of are sitting in the same room, whether they are the leading force or not, didn't agree with it. That is just the way it goes. The idea, of course, of this great man is something, yeah, he is memorable. Yes, he is a symbol for what happened there, but realistically speaking, there are bigger systems, there are bigger machinations behind any point in history. This is something that I really enjoy. Frankly, the last few dev diaries, I've really enjoyed them when it comes to the view of history that is being displayed right here. Historical Austrian policy did not correspond one-to-one to Metternich's personal beliefs, which evolved over time. Within the Secret State Conference, Metternich had a limited portfolio centered around foreign affairs, and his influence within the Austrian court waxed and waned over time. Following what historian Wolfram Siemann referred to as a minor coup by Franz Anton von Kollowrat in December of 1836, Metternich was excluded from briefings and reports of domestic affairs, and matters such as finance and policing would become the exclusive purview of Kollowrat. Past this point, the existence of a Metternich system within Austria itself becomes questionable. Conversely, we must understand that Metternich was not an irrelevancy. The 19th century was, perhaps, the period in which the greatest amount of power was concentrated in the fewest number of hands. To ignore the role of individuals in shaping this era would be a drastic overcorrection. Prior to our period, he played an indispensable personal role in European diplomacy and Austrian policymaking, especially as pertains to the diplomatic service. His historical marginalization at the hands of Kollowrat in 1836 greatly diminished his ability to affect Austrian policy, but he was still capable of actions such as blocking Archduke Karl from assuming supreme command of the Austrian army throughout the 1840s and facilitating the annexation of Krakow in 1846. One may safely say that his term on the Secret States Conference was largely spent in dire political straits, but to present him as a powerless courtier would be both a historiographical mistake and a waste of narrative potential. I can tell you right now, and we're going to come to this obviously, in the German narrative, the story of Metternich ends in 1849. He plays a big role in our discussion of 1815 to 1849, the way that he impacted the German Confederation and his policies impacted it. But ultimately, admittedly, that is a very surface level view, because what you want to describe is the idea of the system, the way that the historical circumstances facilitated the Biedermeier period. So just as an explanation, the Biedermeier period is the period after the initial attempt of achieving some type of unification. You have the Wartburg Festival and so on. Of course, there is very little activity on a political level from the bourgeoisie, outside of primarily, students and so on. The reality making it so that then 1848, 1849 is the breakout from that period. We talked about this in the previous video when it comes to dev diaries for Victoria III, where all of a sudden the bourgeoisie yet again is galvanized into a revolution, or into the attempt of a revolution, right? And in that period, he plays this massive role when it comes to the way that we create and structure the narrative in creating a system, fathering a system, I suppose, that we would refer to, colloquially as System Metternich. Obviously, this is correct. He is just one man. The system isn't run by one man, but by the entire thing. It certainly is the case that Metternich was conservative, at times reactionary even for his time. He was an opponent of enlightened absolutism as embodied by the policies of Joseph II, favoring the traditional privileges of the estates over autocratic power. He was an opponent of convening a central parliament, believing that doing so would inflame tensions between the Habsburg Empire's nationalities. In 1847, he advised King Friedrich Wilhelm of Prussia to refrain from summoning the United Parliament on the same grounds. Despite opposing centralized autocracy, he was an advocate for rationalizing the functions of the imperial government, proposing a system of far-reaching reforms for the secret state conference, which would end the disorganized system of ad hoc written communication with in-person cooperation between agencies. So he wanted to formalize, which is very much the kind of name of the game at the time, he wanted to formalize the structures that be, rather than have an ad hoc system that is just formed the way that it is formed. These reforms would largely never be realized, and the Austrian government would be placed into a long state of semi-paralysis between the December of 1836 and the revolutions of 1848. I will say, obviously, we're not Austrian, or rather, I am not Austrian. Because of this, the narrative, the storytelling focuses on its impact in Germany. The internal, the domestic view is something that we learn relatively little about in general. We are also actually going to get some interesting history here posited by Victoria on the topic of what happened after 1849, because that is, of course, when he got ousted, and apparently stuff happened for him there. A minor coup. Chancellor Klemens von Metternich has proposed a slate of reforms to the structure of the Geheime Staatskonferenz, improving the functioning of the body whilst instating himself as its undisputed head. Franz Anton von Kolowrat-Liebsteinsky has aligned with the royal family to arrest the measure. Kolowrat's meddling threatens the stability of the empire. So this would change it so that he goes against the royal family, which is why the aristocrats in Böhmen and Mähren become upset. You see some issues here with the way that it is run, but they are less significant than what we already had until this point. And I assume if we say the Chancellor had best limit himself to foreign affairs, we get the historical circumstance and we stay in this very paralyzed circumstance. So this is, technically speaking, alt history interesting. Economically, Metternich diverged from the reactionary mold into which he is often placed. Historically, he favored industrialization and closer economic ties between the Zollverein and Austrian Empire, adopting an all-German perspective with regards to economic development. I will say, okay, that this is also the only smart view that Austria could have at the time. If you were to remove yourself from industrialization and the Zollverein, you were looking at a situation where you would doubtlessly have a Prussia-dominated Germany. Now, I will say that does not really imply unification necessarily, but it would mean a weakening of the power of Austria in the Zollverein or the German Confederation in general. More importantly, I personally want to also really stress that being close and favoring to industrialization is not something that only liberals did in the time. Bavaria also very famously was incredibly state interventionist. At the time, a lot of investments happened that came from the state, really favoring, and came from the royal family, really favoring everything related to the topic of let's get the industry, let's get the economy going. This was just kind of sound policy to a certain degree. Obviously, that doesn't mean that ideology cannot reinforce it or hinder it, but realistically speaking, yeah, if you are in any way pragmatic, you are probably going to be in favor of this. In 1841, he proposed an ambitious program of free trade, domestic infrastructure development, and the integration of Austrian and North German railway systems. As with his government reform, this would encounter fierce resistance from Kolowrat's clique, coming down to nothing in the end. Towards the end of his career, one may say that Metternich had joined the tradition of doomed modernizing reformers whose proposals came to be too little and too late. Very classic story, and this was actually even talked about. Let's connect the dots here a little bit. This was talked about in the other Dev Diary on the topic of you ultimately abandoned absolutism, the old reactionary original form of political conservatism in the post-Napoleonic era, once you noticed that it was, and I quote here, of course, the Dev Diary, a spent force. And this is exactly what happened here. He essentially was a part of that spent force. He was desperately trying to bring this force into a different era, and, well, self-evidently, it didn't work out. Too little, too late. Metternich, in all of his personal intricacies, serves as an iconic device from which we may create a narrative. This is also the conclusion that the German history lessons, I think, on a broad scale have taken. The Age of Metternich journal entry available for Austria from GameStart uses him as a lens to present the historical priorities of the Austrian governments throughout the Vormärz period. Right, the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars has established Austria as a leading conservative power in Europe. The leading architect of the post-Napoleonic order, Klemens von Metternich, has served as Chancellor of Austria since the tumultuous year of 1821. His agenda calls for upholding the Austrian autocracy, the maintenance of the conservative peace in Europe, and the promotion of the arts and sciences. So this is his agenda. Let's take a look at this. Prevent Italian unification. Germany has not been unified. You're the leading producer of fine arts, so culture essentially. Austria owns the entire state region of West Galicia, which is annexing Krakow. Now I will say, and I'm actually interested, maybe, you know what, maybe they're going to talk about this, or she's going to talk about this in this. I was under the impression that Krakow fundamentally obviously was a bit of a thorn going on there. I wasn't aware of a dedicated idea of annexing Krakow. This kind of happened after the uprising there. Now, I will say, obviously, I actually didn't look too much into this, what the state policy was of Austria. Obviously, it does make sense if we want to have a historical kind of guideline, a little bit of some railroading right there, right? Then saying, hey, West Galicia, Krakow is in your sphere and you want it to fully be owned by you. That is also something that makes a lot of sense that this is in this journal entry, even if it wasn't a conscious policy. Again, I'm kind of just guessing there that it wasn't. Austria has researched 52 technologies. Interesting. Okay, so don't fall behind, basically. Metternich system has more than 12 members, currently 9. Cohesion of the system is greater than 75. All liberal or socialist political movements have marginal support. Austria has autocracy, censorship, and secret police, so they are nailing you down on certain laws here. And then home affairs and law enforcement institutions are at level 3 or higher. That isn't that difficult, I feel. Anyway, will complete if he is 18 or older and he has become Kaiser. So you need both of these. Makes perfect sense. You basically are talking about a new wave of politics and ideology coming in there. If you complete it, he will peacefully retire. Otherwise, obviously, he gets thrown out the way that he did historically. Let's take a look at this. Any Austrian political movement, revolutionary, has been in opposition for more than 6 consecutive months, and Klemens von Metternich is not the leader. The Austrian aristocracy will have to be in opposition for more than 6 months, and Klemens von Metternich is not the leader of the Austrian aristocracy. Any of those will make this fail. I see how it is. And then he goes away, which is what historically happened. This journal entry contains 10 sub-goals, themed around his foreign and domestic ambitions. If one chooses to pursue his agenda, maintaining Austria's status at the heart of conservative Europe, one will receive rewards of a strength proportional to the number of completed sub-goals. I love this. I love the fact that we have partial success, that there are differentiations between what is happening. They are making a lot of progress when it comes to visualizing what could be happening. We talked about it in the last dev diary, that they made it very apparent when radical change could happen inside of a journal entry, right? The way that they structure the journal entry, basically. This partial stuff is really nice. I was also really hoping that CK3 would start doing this with decisions. You could have different partial sub-goals even within struggle endings, within certain decisions like being landless, and when you want to call it a day, it is always all or nothing. This one isn't. This one is as multifaceted as the underlying historical issue. I really, really like it. To the number of completed sub-goals. And following up on the theme of conflicted historiography, a different parting thought. The Great Conductor exits the stage, or the Great Conductor exits the stage. Wait a minute, so this is peaceful and very successful. He will be remembered as a visionary of the old society, host to an ideal both tantalizing and doomed, or will be remembered as a discredited font of reaction whose vision would prove corrosive to all it touched. Okay, wait a minute. I know that this is just flavor text, but I would love it, genuinely love it, if we got some follow-up events that are like, oh, we have become the Ständestaat, we are Austro-fascist now. That really reminds me of Klemens von Metternich, in a positive or a negative light. I'm just saying that would actually, I like that form of content. It surely would just be an event, it wouldn't do that much, but I would love it if they actually recall what I did previously in a campaign towards the end point of a campaign. That would be really nice. Okay, so I see the difference. Very significant and interesting. One may also choose to follow the historical outcome, sending him away from Vienna with a revolutionary mob at his heels. Indeed, with Austria wrecked by revolutionary turmoil and the government no longer able to guarantee his safety, Klemens von Metternich has been forced to resign from his post. He has fled Vienna and gone into exile. I'm no longer anybody. I have nothing more to do, nothing more to discuss. He will no longer define us, will issue his resignation, and he will leave and become a modernizer. Oh, so he actually could be useful for any backwards country picking him up. That is good. I actually like this. He could technically go to Russia and actually help out over there because he would suddenly be a modernizer. Very interesting. Historically, this was not the end for Metternich. After the revolution, he fled to England, where he hosted many influential visitors, launched a short-lived newspaper endeavor, and became increasingly fond of the British press and parliamentary system. He spoke positively of both the Tory and Whig parties, viewing them to be organic social groupings naturally arisen from British society, whilst condemning continental European political parties as artificial constructs born of pure ideology. Let me just say, first of all, pure ideology is everything that I'm talking about. No, I will tell you right now, this is a bit of a pattern of Germans or German speakers that left their country at the time, where they basically were like, yeah, this place is a hellscape. It is irrecoverable. Never will anything amount from it. A very, very common pattern on all sides, really. To the late Metternich, Germans were simply not civilized enough to possess a parliamentary system. He would later move to Belgium and, during the Neo-absolutist period, back to Vienna, where he would live out the rest of his days in retirement. See, I didn't know that. His story, as far as my mind was concerned, ended in 1849. I will tell you about this content in general. I already mentioned this, of course, in the past. Now we have the details. I really like this. I think this approach is good on a design level, but also on a historical view level. Autocracy in the Age of Liberty. The revolutions of 1848 brought the Austrian Empire to the brink of collapse. Revolutions in the empire's Italian provinces brought Austria into a war with a coalition of Italian states, at the same time as the Hungarian revolutionary government launched its War of Independence. For a time, Vienna, Milan, Venice and Budapest were all in the hands of revolutionaries, and the Austrian court was forced to flee to Innsbruck. It took the combined efforts of Austria, Russia and Prussia to crush each rebellion and restore imperial authority to each corner of Austria. In the waning days of the revolutions, the newly enthroned emperor Franz Joseph I issued a series of decrees which granted him absolute power, abolished the Diet of Hungary, and partitioned the former Kingdom of Hungary into several military districts. This marked the beginning of Neo-absolutism, a period in which the emperor and Viennese bureaucracy embarked upon a radical program of centralization. The Neo-absolutists, exemplified by Interior Minister Alexander Bach, sought to abolish the traditional privileges of the crown lands, instating an authoritarian, unitary regime that sought to marginalize nationalist sentiments through economic growth and quality governance. Through centralization, reform, and efficient bureaucracy, the empire's future will be secured. Will activate if Austria has enacted any variant. Okay, so these two laws. Has no crown land or personal union subjects, so you annex them. At least one of these is a type of petite bourgeoisie. Interest group is powerful, and ruler interest group is petite bourgeoisie. So either the ruler is really friendly with them, or they are simply becoming very important. Interesting. So this is Neo-absolutism. I like the idea of this. This doesn't seem too tight. It doesn't seem too loose. It is a very particular path, eventually, that you can discover. It is enabled for an autocratic Austria that has both successfully eliminated all of its crown land subjects. The Neo-absolutist projects emphasizes on empowering the bureaucracy, and achieving social peace through the power of the state is very much in line with the spirit of the Austrian Biedermänner, and so one may choose to pursue this journal entry with either a petite bourgeoisie inclined monarch or a powerful government. Let's take a look at this. Constitutional pressure is negligible. Accept the papal concordat, abolish feudal obligations, marginalize the crown land diets. Okay, so we come into the state where we annex them, and then we still need to facilitate it. In the free content, you also annex them and then still need to facilitate it, but here we get more. The pillars of the Bacchian system rest upon its four armies: a standing army of soldiers, a sitting army of officials, a kneeling army of priests, and a creeping army of sneaks. The threat of revolution from below has necessitated that Vienna conduct its own from above. Through the establishment of a centralized, rational and effective state apparatus, staffed by loyal and capable bureaucrats, the country will be modernized to meet the challenges of this day and age. Constitutional pressure. So they yet again actually explain the concept. Oh, I love this so much. If opposition to Austria's neo-absolutist project grows too strong, Vienna will be forced to yield to demands for reform and grant a constitution. So basically, when this goes up, what will happen? Instead of not telling you, which is what they did in the past, they are telling you you will be forced to adopt an actual constitution. Very nice. At least, alright, what is this? Oh, and they're doing partial stuff again. At least 4 of the following. The GDP greater than 22.8 million, it doesn't seem that difficult. All of these, our powering must be within the top 3. That is kind of difficult. Austria has higher GDP than Prussia. That, mixed bag. Depends on how aggressive Prussia is in this patch. Austria has enforced a war goal in Prussia, while this general, okay, well, I guess, okay. So if you have this, you will definitely have this. This kind of goes hand in hand with you need to win the clash with Prussia. We have marginalized the crown land diets. Okay, so that would be this right there. We have accepted this and we have abolished. So these 3 are enough if you then have GDP, or you do these 3 and then you defeat Prussia. So it's basically either or. If completed, you enable the law Neo-absolutism in distribution of power, and it triggers the event the rule of quill and bayonet. Will fail if the pressure goes to 100. We have established Austria-Hungary. Austria does not have any variant of autocracy or secret belief. Okay, I get this. This is a solid journal entry. To successfully complete this journal entry, one must successfully complete 4 out of its 5 conditions before constitutional pressure gets too intense. This pressure abstracts the various conditions which led to the historical fall of the neo-absolutist regime, from the passive resistance of the Hungarian political establishment to the military defeats against Prussia and Italy. That is why the Prussia thing is still in here. This will increase if Having a war goal enforced anew, bankruptcy, loans, radicals, interest groups opposing autocracy, activism of these movements. Okay, yeah, I get it. Having a positive budget balance, so you want to be slow, so you can't grow that much. Enforcing a war goal on any great power, interesting. States with loyalists, interest groups supporting autocracy, good movements for you, I suppose. Having a bureaucracy surplus and events and other conditions. This seems feasible. I feel like this is feasible to manage quite well as a player, and probably as an AI as well. None of these things are categorically stuff that the AI doesn't understand, right? The Neo-absolutist period had a highly Catholic character, with clerical absolutism and Neo-absolutism being largely synonymous. In 1855, Alexander Bach signed a concordat with the Pope that granted the Catholic Church greatly expanded authority within the Austrian Empire, especially over education. Signing this concordat is one of the possible ways one may move to this journal entry's completion. Through their reckless pursuit of reform, Josephinists and liberals have undermined the very foundations of our great empire, our unwavering faith and loyalty to the throne of St. Peter. We must reverse the damage that they have done and reach an agreement with the Church that will ensure its presence is felt at all levels of society, from the schoolroom to the sacrament of marriage. Not opposing, right? Good relations. You get state religion and religious schools. That's not awful. Okay. They become more loyalist, Protestant popes become more radical, and Metternich system gains 100 leverage in the papal states. I guess it's good for the requirement, but 10 constitutional pressure is nothing to sneeze at. Other parties of the regime are disempowering the crown and diets and completing the abolition of feudal obligations, such as the widely despised Robert. The serfdom patent of 1781 freed Austrian peasants from being bound to the land, yet they remain obligated to perform Robert corvée labor, pay feudal dues, and submit to manorial jurisdiction. While eliminating these arcane obligations would win the regime favor among reformers, it will also provoke the ire of the landowning elite, who stands to lose both wealth and influence from the proposal. So this is about disempowering the estates and putting hand back into the central government in Vienna. Does not have manorialism enacted, does not have crown land diets enacted, okay. Decrease the pressure, oh, that is nice, okay. So you kind of have this counteracting the previous journal entry. You get a lot of bonuses there, I like it, okay, yeah. Pretty decent, I think, to achieve. If one can successfully complete this journal entry, they will be rewarded with a unique distribution of power law, representing the refined and entrenched neo-absolutist system. This serves as a variant of autocracy that grants even more authority and favors bureaucrats over aristocrats. Again, because the state is what matters, not the aristocrats. Neo-absolutism, yep, this is good. Unlocks command economy. Hello. More ways to a command economy. I won't say no to this. Just on a gameplay level, you don't have that many ways to command economy. I will take this. If one fails to entrench this system, one will come to the historical outcome. The government's creditors will lose patience with the neo-absolutist project and demand that it either issue a constitution or have its credit cut off. At this point, one may choose to either do as they wish or suffer a sharp increase in interest rate. Can you still do the journal entry? Even when this triggers? What can you do then? Is the neo-absolutist project over? The patience of the Austrian establishment has run out. Frustrated by the perceived mismanagement of the neo-absolutist faction, they demand the immediate granting of a constitution. I getcha. Now this one is interesting. So just to talk about this content, I think it is good content. I think this makes a lot of sense. And again, it is a very different playstyle, especially because you don't fall either into extremely bourgeois conditions or into communist conditions and can still go command economy. Super interesting. I like it. Grunderzeit. Now we're talking. The Grunderzeit, or founding period, was a time of great speculation and economic growth in the German states. During this time, the development of the German railway system and liberalization of corporate law led to an explosion in the amount of enterprises founded per year. The frenetic economic tempo of this period would continue until the Panic of 1873. A stock market crash so severe that the term Great Depression was first used to describe it. We call it Gründerkrach, which basically means founder panic, founder breakdown, I guess. Grunderzeit, a German economic miracle, is yet on the horizon. 75% or more of all German countries in Europe have research mutual funds, right, so this activates it. The Grunderzeit is a journal entry shared across all of the German states, representing the free and wild speculation of this era. Whilst this journal entry is active, all German states will contribute to its goal, to increase their collective GDP by 2.5% each quarter. At the beginning of this period, one may... we could, if this works, I don't know whether this is going to work well. We currently don't have a system for economic crisis. And I'm not certain bespoke narrative content is necessarily going to be how that should be solved. But I will say, if you measured all people that participate in the Western economy, specifically in the Western economy, and you prompted all of them, you need to deliver 2% or 3% of growth on average, no matter what, like all the great powers. And if that doesn't happen, all of your investors will panic and all of you will go through a crisis. You could get, maybe once or twice a playthrough, something interesting, right? An economic crash on a global scale. Now, not all of them were on a global scale, obviously. If this journal entry feels good, maybe getting some bespoke content just so that we have interesting gameplay on the economic side could be interesting, right? If the global kind of growth stops happening, you could be looking at investors panic and all of a sudden all the empires have issues. Could be interesting. They all need to grow by 2.5 each quarter. At the beginning of this period, one may choose the degree to which one wishes to commit to the Grunderzeit, taking on various amounts of risk depending on the option one chooses. Let's take a look. Spurred on by innovations in financial law and the proliferation of the railway, the German lands are abuzz with activity, with new companies and business ventures springing up like toadstools. This is a different font in the flavor text, isn't it? I think so. The foreman cracks his whip again, driving the exhausted team of horses forward. They had made decent progress today. Most of the sand had been carried off the side, but decent is not good. And even good is hardly sufficient. The whip cracks out again. The foreman feels a pang of guilt for the poor creatures, but quickly pushes the thought away. Mercy will not transform this site into a new factory. Determination will. Buy, invest, expand. Let's see. 2.5% growth per quarter. Bonuses will be stronger, but also the crash will be harder. The following modifier will be active for the duration. Okay, so we get more money. We get slightly less more money. I see. Okay, so I will always be picking this. I am all in. The curve will only go up. It's only going upwards. This is what it looks like when we industrialize, okay? Always go full all in. Never put anything to the side. Take the options. You will win. Get it twisted. You will never lose. This is exactly the attitude here that you should have when you do this journal entry. Whilst the Grunderzeit is ongoing, the German states will be expected to maintain consistent quarterly collective growth of 2.5%. Failing to meet this target for any given quarter, Jesus, I thought it would be like in succession or something, will decrease the progress bar, representing declining investor confidence. Failing 4 quarters in a row will trigger the panic that historically put an end to this period. If one manages to maintain this constantly inflating bubble for 30 years in a row, one will successfully ride out the Grunderzeit without experiencing, oh my god. I am going to enjoy massively building so much, okay? Grunderzeit. An investment craze has gripped the German lands. This is now important, keep in mind, to explain very adequately how you're doing is important. Driven by boundless optimism, speculative ambition, and the promise of a new industrial age. Last quarterly result, 30.8 million. Germany, GDP quarterly goal, 31.6 million. So okay, this is good statistics. Tempo of the founding years. The Grunderzeit journal entry is organized in financial quarters. Each 3 months, the combined... What you people in the team have done, this explanatory stuff and the possible event effects is so... This is a good sign. The fact that they are innovating on clarity in a very simple, straightforward way. I like it. Oh, and if you are succeeding, it will actually increase by 1, which means you can restore it. So like, slight weakness during like, I don't know, a war, for example, totally feasible, as long as you then make it back up as well. Very nice. Obviously, this is Gründerkrach, and this is 30 years of progress. We believe that it is entirely reasonable to expect an economy to maintain 30 years of uninterrupted growth and have staked our entire life savings on it. Thank you. This is what I'm saying. Victoria on the actual team for Victoria 3 knows what is happening. That is exactly right. Put all your money into stocks, into options, and maybe into puts if you really want to. Definitely use levers whenever you can. Make sure that you can win or lose $1 trillion that you do not have. That is the way that I live my life as well. Following decades of economic prosperity, the intense drive and activity that defined them has now somewhat abated. These years will go down in Austrian history as some of her most glorious. I wonder what the effects actually are. Now, next up, anyway, is the Triple Monarchy. Let's take a look at it. The Kingdom of Croatia existed as an autonomous unit within the Hungarian portion of Habsburg monarchy since the 16th century. Historically, the Austro-Hungarian Compromise was soon followed by the Croatian-Hungarian Compromise, which confirmed the self-governing status of the Croatian Sabor and legally merged the lands of Croatia and Slavonia. Croatia existed as an autonomy within Hungary from 1867 to 1918, after which it briefly achieved the de jure status as a third co-equal crown within the collapsing Habsburg monarchy. This situation lasted only for 1 week, after which the Croatian Sabor voted to terminate the union and declare independence from Austria as a constituent of the state of Slovenes, Croats and Serbs, Yugoslavia. Croatian independence from Hungary and the establishment of a South Slavic unit within the empire had long been a demand of Croatian nationalists. The first expression of this demand within our time period was the Illyrian movement of the 1830s and 40s, a political current amongst the Croatian intelligentsia calling for the establishment of a unified South Slavic state within the Austrian Empire. Its demands included the unification of Croatia, Slavonia and Dalmatia under a single triune kingdom, the separation of Croatia from Hungary, and the use of the Croatian language in the Croatian Sabor. Activists of the movement may also be credited with the development and popularization of the Croatian literary language. The Austro-Hungarian Compromise, which set a precedent for separate crowns under the Austrian Emperor, created hopes amongst South Slavs for a triple monarchy between Austria, Hungary and Croatia. This political current would be referred to as trialism, and its supporters would include two ill-fated heirs of the Austrian crown, Crown Prince Rudolf and Archduke Franz Ferdinand. If one chooses to establish the dual monarchy through the Matter of Hungary journal entry, and Hungary is choosing to be uncooperative, one may choose to create a third crown through the decision to issue a trialist manifesto. The trialist manifesto will split Croatia from Hungary and transform Austria-Hungary into an Austria-Hungary-Croatia. Such a measure, however, will require Hungarian approval, and this may prove difficult to acquire. Let's see. You issue the manifesto. This happens when rebellious attitude towards Austria is present in Hungary, basically. It's a more general term, but that's basically what it is. Hungary gets the event. Emperor King Franz Joseph issues trialist manifesto. Okay. Once this decision is taken, Hungary will receive an event in which they may choose to veto the manifesto. If Hungary does so, Austria will be faced with a choice of their own. Under the terms of the Austro-Hungarian Compromise, the Austrian Emperor has no legal recourse to enforce such a decision on Hungary. Will they seize their pursuit of the Triple Crown, or will they make use of an illegal appeal to force the military? A military intervention was not out of the question historically. By the early 20th century, tensions between Austria and Hungary had developed to the point that Franz Ferdinand intended to do precisely this upon taking the throne, breaking the dualist structure of the empire and forcing the introduction of universal suffrage in Hungary at gunpoint. They veto it. The government of Hungary has vetoed the Emperor King's manifesto promising a co-equal monarchy for the Croatian people. Hungary's refusal has sparked discontent amongst the South Slavic population of both halves of the empire. Mobilize the army, they become loyalists, makes perfect sense. If neither side gives in, open war will break out between the halves of the empire. So you want to prep yourself. If you do this, make sure that Russia is on your side, right? Make sure Prussia isn't about to come for you. If Hungary consents to the manifesto, or if Austria can successfully enforce a war goal on it during an enforced trialist manifesto diplomatic play, Croatia will be established as a new personal union, subject of Austria, and the dual monarchy will become the triple monarchy. I like this, that's interesting gameplay. With Hungary brought to heel by military force, a co-equal kingdom of Croatia has been organized out of the empire's Croatian territories. The dual monarchy has become the triple monarchy. You can decide just historical lands, you can say you get the Slovene lands as well, or at least a portion I suppose, or you turn them into effectively Illyria. If one establishes a triple monarchy, Croatia will typically be much more amicable to imperial interests than Hungary will be. This will be quite useful if one seeks to pursue the next step in reforming the empire, the United States of Greater Austria. Welcome back flavor for both Kaiserreich and Victoria too, okay? Obviously this is the mid-step. You failed Neo-absolutist stuff where you would have unified it all. Now you are kind of going apart again so that you can then unify it as the USGA, the federal solution. In 1906, Aurel Popovici published the United States of Greater Austria, an ambitious proposal to reorganize the Austro-Hungarian Empire into a Greater Austria with 15 federal states. This proposal swiftly attracted attention amongst a circle of radical reformers that surrounded Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austrian throne at the time. It is important to note that Popovici's proposal was essentially a conservative one, with its objective being the dismemberment of Hungary and maintenance of the Habsburg dynasty. To Popovici, the Hungarian state was dominated by a Kosothist revolutionary conspiracy which sought to subvert the Austrian Empire and transform the various nationalities of Hungary into a unitary, uniform mass through Magyarization. Furthermore, he believed that this homogenization was a natural result of cosmopolitan democracy, and that nationalism was necessary to resist the homogenizing impulses of the state. The proposal of the USGA was hence heavily focused upon ethnic autonomy, drawing borders along very precise linguistic lines and designating its federal units by ethnicity. Whilst other proposals for the federalization of the empire existed, such as Lajos Kossuth's plan for the organization of a republican Danubian state circa 1848, and the territorial federalization supported by the Austro-Marxists, we have deemed Popovici's USGA to be the most feasible. This journal entry is thus flavored around a more conservative approach. If Austria has formed a dual or triple monarchy, it will receive a proposal for federalization of the monarchy upon researching pan-nationalism. Declining the proposal will dismiss the relevant journal entry and enable a decision which will allow one to reconsider it at any time one wishes. Gotcha. The Weiss-Jonak proposal. An influential figure within the armed forces has presented a proposal. So this is this proposal, but with an actual person. You know, the more I'm thinking about this now, this consequence of the USGA proposal. Do you remember that one proposal where you unify Europe? It was written by an Austrian, very Catholic Austrian for what it's worth. and it was centered in Vienna. They were meant to call this town, what was it, St. Georg? I'm not entirely certain, but they essentially wanted to center all of Europe, Western Europe anyway, in Vienna. And what they wanted to do was the opposite of this. They said, we need to destroy all ethnicities, we need to destroy all languages, all cultures, all rights, all traditions, by having these basically pie chart type kind of districts. If you are Hungarian, for example, you will be stationed as basically a soldier suppressing the people that are living there until they are becoming fully European rather than, you know, their own individual ethnicity. You are stationed in a district that isn't your own, right? So where are no Hungarians. This is like the opposite proposal of this, if you really think about it. That one was a very ethno-nationalist, or rather a European, pan-European type of approach to this issue. The direct kind of opposite, which is why I'm like, it must have been informed, at least to a degree, by the politics of this type of proposal. The Federal Solution journal entry allows one to build their own USGA. In order to succeed in this journal entry, one must both assemble a coalition of nationalities willing to sign on to the project and get one's applicable personal unions, crown lands, and puppets to cooperate. So obviously, we are styling this in a way very similar to Kaiserreich content. I haven't played in ages, but I remember that content. We're styling this in a way where I need to get various minorities to support me so that I can go to the Hungarians and go, buddy, you gotta give in. Nothing you can do. And that is how you get people on your side. This proposal has been met with opposition from Hungarian politicians who oppose this proposed division of historical Hungary, as well as the South German populations, which would likely become minorities within non-German states. Has integrated 5 or more cultures, okay. Has signed federalization into law. All Austrian, that is just a button, yes. Yes, all primary cultures have been successfully integrated. Relations with Austria are greater than or equal to 50. Gotcha. Annex Krakow, so you annex all your puppets, I assume. All European cultures with homelands in our states, in Danubia, Balkans, Poland, or South Germany, will adapt the Danubian tradition trait. So this is much like the Russosphere tradition trait. Austria will be reorganized into the USGA, and you get the other course. If you fail, which happens if you fail to integrate the cultures, if there is a civil war, if you get ethno-state and national supremacy, you just lose all primary cultures added by the journal. You're right, okay, so you go back to the status quo, I guess. Once this proposal is accepted, all Austrian crown lands and personal unions will receive a journal entry of their own, allowing for them to choose whether to either combat or assist the formation of the USGA. If one has a powerful personal union with high liberty desires, such as Hungary, one may need to accede to the particular demands of their dominant cultures, possibly throwing other cultures to the winds in the name of securing their cooperation. Yeah, I get it. If a subject is especially uncooperative, of course, they may be unwilling to accept even that. In such cases, extraordinary measures may be necessary. Hungarian government rejects integration. We will need to make do without them. Have been disqualified. Negative. Okay, how do I react to this, I want? To assemble a collection of nationalities, one must address their grievances with other cultures and draw the map of the future USGA in a manner that is advantageous to them. It is not possible to get every culture on board. One must be strategic and try and maximize. We are basically carving up and playing out cultures against each other. I love it. That is great content. And try and maximize the number of integrated cultures whilst disqualifying as few cultures as possible. An integrated culture is one that is willing to cooperate with a federalization project. Address these concerns. So it tells you the story of what their concerns are. What do you do then? The average acceptance is 40 or higher. Has enacted subjecthood. Okay. Slovak is a primary culture in the country. Triggers the event the fate of Slovakia. And they can't be mad at you. Okay, I get it. The following cultures may be integrated through this. Oh, okay, so you see what gets disqualified. I getcha. Okay. Each button will give one choice on how to address a culture's demands. To integrate one culture will often disqualify another, or at the very least, radicalize a portion of that culture's population and worsen relations with subjects of that culture. Furthermore, if one violates promises one has already made, the betrayed culture will immediately become disqualified and spawn a much larger amount of radicals. I like this. That's kind of neat. I can build a different USJ every time I play. Very interesting. The Ukrainian population of Ostgalizien has, since this day of the Commonwealth, been ruled by Polish elites. The largely Polish population of the city of Lviv has requested autonomy under a Polish state. To accept would appease the Poles, yet deny the Ukrainian state a vital economic engine. Galicia, there's a peculiar dynamic there. The aristocrats loathe the Emperor King, but the peasants adore him. The last time the aristocrats, Poles mostly, tried to revolt, the peasants stormed their manors and strung them up. We were obliged to send in the army to protect the would-be rebels. If one were to ask me, I would say that earned the Ruthenians their state, right then and there. Oh, I like the flavor. I like the approach to this. I like that I can... Basically, I don't expect unless I do gross miscalculations in who gets disqualified, right? I don't expect this to be that difficult, but I like that I have so much freedom in building a USGA that is different from another. I think that is cool. Okay, Ukrainian will be successfully integrated, Polish will be disqualified. Makes perfect sense. One has assembled a coalition of nationalities. Once one has assembled it, one may sign federalization into law, locking in one's current coalition. At this point, one must either get one's subjects into line or cut them loose to save the whole. Completing this journal entry will annex all of Austria's applicable subjects and change the country's name to the USGA, with a pleasing marble grey map color and an extremely interesting flag. That is just the standard color. Okay. Hello? The declaration of the USGA has established the A National Union as a solid alternative to the prevailing nation-state model. Where others may draw legitimacy from shared blood, we will draw strength from the dynasty and the diversity of our people. Gotcha. And then Ode to Joy starts playing. I'm gonna be honest with you, this is just Austria's color. I will also note, Turkey has fallen apart in this, Romania is formed, Italy is kind of looking better than ever, Germany, that's interesting. Now we do also see, of course, there is the Nubian right here, this is a tradition and all these cultures have it, even the North Germans, Jesus, okay. The Ständestaat. In 1891, Pope Leo XIII published Rerum Novarum, an encyclical addressing the condition of the working class. This encyclical detailed the Catholic approach to the social question, outlined the duties of capital and labor to support one another, expressed support for workers' rights to form trade unions, and criticized both laissez-faire capitalism and socialism. This document served a foundational role in the history of Catholic corporatism and would provide support for conservative trade unions against their politically radical rivals. In the years following Rerum Novarum, Catholic political parties such as the Austrian Christian Social Party would tend to drift in a corporatist direction. This is I like this history. It's very interesting. It's very interesting because obviously you need an answer for the social question, and this is the social question answer coming from the Catholic Church. Following the fall of the Austrian Empire and the October Revolution in Russia, figures in the Christian Social Party would become radicalized against its social democratic opponents, advocating for an end to parliamentary democracy and the replacement of the First Austrian Republic with a corporate state, or Ständestaat. The Christian Socials, Landbund, and Heimwehr paramilitary organizations would collaborate to end Austrian democracy in 1933, ushering in a period of corporatist dictatorship commonly referred to as Austrofascism. Yeah, so this is the other option. Inspired by discontent towards Austrian parliamentary democracy, the traditional classes have begun to orient themselves towards the corporatist movement. Their platform invokes Catholic social teachings and the pacification of the labor movement under a corporate state, which, by the way, is pretty much also what the fellow was proposing in the pamphlet. I read the whole pamphlet about that pan-European union that I talked about in the past. This is pretty much what he was going for as well. Defeat socialism by having everybody invested in a common economy, which still is different from capitalism, obviously, but you basically want to turn them all into that position so that they are completely immune to potential class interest considerations. Historically, the Austro-fascist takeover occurred towards the very tail end of a period under a republic in Austria that had lost its empire. However, one may argue that the rise of Austro-fascism did not necessarily require such a cataclysm. I did ask her, by the way, when I was in Stockholm, I was like, is this going to be as limited? But the answer is no. The tendencies which would lead to the Austro-fascist regime were endemic to the Christian Social Party, and anti-democratic sentiments were hardly unknown in Austria-Hungary. Yeah, welcome to the German-speaking world in that period. The extension of universal male suffrage in 1907, a measure implemented due to a general strike supported by the Social Democratic Party, created a great degree of resentment in Austrian conservative circles and the military. The Austrian military pushed for a law which included wide-ranging wartime powers in 1912, allowing for direct control of production by the military. These laws, in combination with an article of the 1867 Constitution permitting for rule by decree and a harshly reactionary military establishment, led to a state of military dictatorship in Austria following the outbreak of the First World War. A transition from a unitary Austrian Empire to an enlarged Ständestaat is thus not entirely implausible. I'm gonna be honest with you, I like how much this content loves history. That is what it is. This content loves history because it wants to generate plausible alt history that makes sense, that is intuitive, that leaves you down into a particular direction that isn't super exclusionary, where you have to sit down and be like, well, this would have been nice content, but I'm locked out because I'm not in a very particular... No. They are saying, the team sat down and said, we're going to write this content in a way that facilitates it so that you can enact or engage with this, even if you aren't in the exact historical condition. That is good. That is robust content right there. At least one of these, census suffrage or universal suffrage. Okay, so you need to be somewhat democratic to have this kind of, fighting back of the old conservative establishment, does not have dual or triple monarchy, has research... Oh, that's a very late tech. That is a late tech for a country like Austria. The tech gating I'm cautious about, because that is so possibly awful between patches. Whenever they change tech speed, how it works, ooh, maybe you're never going to see this content, okay? Type is corporatist movement, so if you have corporatist, this works. Oh, like, I get why it's locked, I'm just saying, these are always dangerous. At least one of these, you have an acted corporate state, is an acting corporate state, or there is a movement that is strong enough that wants corporate state. Okay. The Ständestaat journal entry is available for a democratic Austria that has neither formed the dual or triple monarchy. We already talked about this, right? Eliminate parliament. The rise of mass politics in Austria has spurred the rise of a counter-movement amongst the traditional classes. The corporatist movement seeks to abolish the Diet and multi-party democracy in favor of a corporate state, or Ständestaat. Whilst this journal entry is active, the rate at which corporatist characters appear will be increased. Will complete if single-party state, corporatized unions. Yeah, okay, so the full integration of the state and society into a corporatist circumstance. Interesting, okay. If one chooses to embrace the corporatist project and get a sympathetic figure as head of state, one may immediately transition to a single-party state through a button. To represent the Fatherland's Front's strange, nebulous identity, this button will transition whatever political party the head of state belongs to into the Fatherland Front. This means that one may have a Fatherland Front with a conservative, agrarian, militaristic, fascistic, or Catholic favor, depending on the party which formed it. I like that, that's cool. Okay, so you can just do this. Once one has enacted a set of corporatist laws and repressed the socialists, Austria will be successfully reorganized into the Ständestaat. Listen, I'm gonna tell ya, this is not an endorsement. I like the flag. The flag is cute. The flag's really cute and, you know, like, in real life. Again, they weren't that great in real life. Anyway, we are aware that there is a heated debate amongst historians over whether the Fatherland Front was truly fascist or not. Austrofascism itself is a controversial term. We have designed this content to be agnostic on this question. To draw a sharp line between the realms of fascism and not fascism posits a clean qualitative difference between the two, which is a questionable thesis at best. I agree. It's a very complex topic, but fascism itself, the actual clean distinction, isn't that feasible. We believe in taking a descriptive approach. The Fatherland Front must be assessed according to its real character, not what labels may be applied to it from on high. The Hungarian Revolution was one of the most spectacular occurrences of the 1848 revolutions. Beginning as a lawful revolution by reform-inclined Hungarian magnates for a better position within the Austrian Empire, it evolved into a full-scale war for independence, lasting for more than a year and necessitating Russian intervention to defeat. The Hungarian Revolution journal entry for Hungary allows one to pursue the same ends the historical Hungarian revolutionaries did, a liberal, modern Hungarian nation-state, either independent or occupying an autonomous and untouchable position within the Habsburg Empire. Right, promulgate the 12 points, proclaim union with Transylvania, or establish the Honved army. This is Lajos Kossuth, of course. If you're Hungarian, you will know who that is. Citizens by compulsion, should Hungary find itself opposing Austria in a diplomatic play, oppressed minorities may take advantage of the situation and try to throw off the Magyar yoke. The 1848-1849 revolutions in Germany are complex, but the ones in Austria are also extremely complex, maybe, or possibly more so, because you had everybody that was rebelling was also simultaneously fearing rebellion from others against them. You just kind of go down the list like this. This is the ethnic plurality of the Austrian Empire in action. This is democracy manifest. Will complete if you own all the homelands, right? You're not a subject or you are a personal union. I get it, okay. And then you trigger country of countries, or you fail if you get dunked on, and then you are getting dunked on, okay. The unique interactions in this journal entry allow a Hungary player to rapidly liberalize at the cost of a major rift with Austria. One will want to time one's political revolution carefully at a time when the Austrians are otherwise occupied, such as, for example, the springtime of the peoples. I like this. This is smart design. Promulgate the 12 points is when you start this radical reform, right? Gets the event Hungarian Spring. There's a major risk. There might be war coming. Enables all of these laws, very liberal, very modernist, like they said, and then you push that through. If you get the Honved army as well, you get your own new army, and there are certain requirements, actually quite considerable requirements, I would argue, that you need to fulfill there. But once you do it, on your feed Magyar, the following are all possible effects from on your feed Magyar, depending on, I guess, what you have, right? Home defense, Daginch, and oh, the home defense is huge, okay. Gets forward Honveds. Okay, so this is if you think you can take them, this is if you think you cannot take them. Gotcha. And then you can also get more conscriptable battalions. That's pretty big. The enthusiastic megarization programs pursued by the Hungarian revolutionaries, however, are certain to spark dissent. Historically, these policies led the many minority populations of Hungary siding with the Austrian imperial forces during Hungary's independence war. A war that drags on for too long may lead to these minority-dominated territories breaking away and seeking status as autonomous crownlands within the Austrian Empire. You can screw it all up, and this is good content. Hear me out here, because this means if you are not Hungary, if you're not Austria, you can see a completely different Austria every playthrough. Interesting stuff will happen whether you are there or not. I've criticized this so much in the past. Algeria is still looking at this. The France content, just for the record, is significantly better than it was at launch. I was so mad with that review. It is much better now. This is good content by default. The questions are bugs, the questions are balancing, but the content itself is robust. Very nice. If you successfully secure Hungarian independence, this will allow one to choose a monarchy from the various noble houses of Europe. Oh, that's cool. Okay, I like it. That's awesome. Now, almost last but not least, we have National Awakening. The National Awakening journal entry represents the efforts of the various Balkan nations to develop their national identities. It is available to all Balkan nations which have researched nationalism, have a non-subject citizenship law, and have achieved a certain degree of independence from their overlord. Right, at this point you go and you want to become independent, yada yada yada. This journal entry creates a National Awakening map marker when it is enabled and is accompanied by numerous events, all with the theme of developing a country's national identity. We already talked about this with the fervor, right? The way that this worked, we talked about it in a previous video. Check that out if you haven't already. You get a national epic, sure, we got flavor, yada, boring, okay, I'm joking. This makes sense, this is how you build yourself up. Additionally, we are also getting other free content. Okay, I see. Update 1.10 brings a new use of the map of the game, the National Awakening marker. A National Awakening marker highlights the epicenter of a nation's national awakening, the point at which a nation's literary culture reaches critical mass and catalyzes a rapid increase in national consciousness. And then we mark this. Do they do anything with these markers? A culture may have one National Awakening per game. National Awakenings may occur when a culture reaches 30 cultural fervor. A National Awakening will catalyze the formation of a national movement, increase attraction to cultural movements, and further increase fervor whilst it is active. As a multinational empire, a subject culture having its National Awakening is something to keep an eye on. Right. First of all, they are reintroducing striped cultural provinces. Thank God. I have missed it. I like these markers, just for the record. I guess, no, actually, okay. I was about to say, well, how much do they do with this? For example, map markers in CK3, you walk through this, you get a bonus. Let me be clear. The fact alone that I can keep track of how nationalism is awakening in Europe that is a good thing, okay? I will support that. That is grand. So I'm not going to say anything negative about the follow-up kind of implementation of this feature, right? Also, again, like I said, I endorse having a striped map. Thank God. Let's talk about colonial slavery. Today's topic, slavery. At game start, many European nations had either banned or chosen to not recognize the institution of slavery on their mainland territories, whilst maintaining the institution in their overseas colonies. The colonial slavery law represents this state of affair, allowing countries to safely cordon the institution of slavery off from the prying eyes of respectable citizens. This law functions as debt slavery in unincorporated states and slavery banned in incorporated states. But this law is active, discriminated pops. I wish that they locked this to overseas. This is Spain, Portugal, Denmark, the Netherlands, and France. We also do have something that is really insane, and let's talk about it, okay? I forgot to mention a very important addition we made. A new event that fires upon forming Greater Germany. Now, if one forms Greater Germany, one receives an event that increases infamy and radicalism amongst either German or minority pops, depending on laws, if one refuses to release the former Austrian Empire. That's cool. So now I can do this without it just being broken. It's still probably going to be broken, but there's context here that is in there. Establishing an unpartitioned Greater German state will raise fears among the other great powers. 70 infamy. That's a containment wall right there. Look at these borders. Look at these borders. This is cute. I love it. Yes, thank you very much. I gotta form this. Folks, I can really only say one thing. This immersion... Is it an immersion pack? Is that what I call it? I think they do, right? I wasn't expecting much. That isn't me saying I think their content sucks. That is me saying we got so much in the mechanical pack related, well, to everything. Charters of Commerce. Every single piece of content that I have seen so far that we're going to see tomorrow. Okay, maybe tomorrow I might be a little bit critical because the Montenegro stuff, it's very gimmicky, I feel. Everything that I have seen for Austria, for all the other stuff, is really robust. It is really good. They have learned about the UX. I am looking forward to this a ton. More than I thought I was going to. So, with that being said, Let me know what you think, whether you agree or disagree. Let me know what you think about the historical tidbits that we talked about. And my god, look at the time. It's 1 billion hours of just talking about von Metternich. I will leave it right here, and I will see you later, alligator.